I was sitting in my living room when my son-in-law stormed in, ripped the cable out of the wall, and told me I was lowering the intellectual standard of the house I had built with my own hands. The betrayal wasn't the broken wire. It was my daughter standing behind him, silent and complicit, letting him treat me like a squatter. So if you've ever had to fight for your dignity, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this is the story of how I turned the tables. I didn't scream and I didn't fight back. I just walked to the guest room and made a plan that would leave them with nothing but the clothes on their backs. The television didn't just turn off, it died. 1 second, the evening news anchor was mid-sentence, talking about a storm front moving in from the coast. The next, the screen collapsed into a singularity of black glass. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, sudden, and violent. I looked down at the wall baseboard. The coaxial cable hadn't wiggled loose. The metal connector was bent at a sharp, unnatural angle. It had been ripped clean out of the plaster. Fine white dust drifted down onto the beige carpet like snow. I gripped the armrests of my recliner. My knuckles turned white. I turned my chair slowly, the leather creaking in the dead quiet of the living room. Brad was standing there. He held the severed end of the black wire in his hand, dangling it like a trophy, or a dead snake. He was smiling, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. It was a wolf's smile, teeth bared, not in joy, but in a warning. "You're lowering the intellectual standard of this house, Arthur," Brad said. His voice was smooth, casual. He didn't call me Dad. He hadn't called me Dad in 6 months. He dropped the wire. It hit the hardwood floor with a plastic clack that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Read a book," he said, wiping his hands on his expensive dress pants. "It's better for your brain." "What's left of it, anyway?" He chuckled. It was a dry, hollow sound, like dead leaves skittering on pavement. I felt the heat rise in my chest. I was 68 years old. In another life, I was an investigative journalist. I had stared down corrupt mayors and exposed union bosses who had threatened to break my legs. I had a Pulitzer collecting dust in a box somewhere. But here, in the living room I had paid for with 30 years of blood and ink, I was a ghost. "This is my house, Brad," I whispered. My voice betrayed me. It came out thin, raspy. Brad stopped halfway to the kitchen. He didn't turn around immediately. He let the silence stretch, controlling the tempo. Then he pivoted. His eyes were dead cold. "It's our home, Arthur," he corrected. "We're just letting you stay here." He turned his back on me, walking into the kitchen. I heard the suction of the refrigerator door opening, the hiss of a bottle cap twisting off. He took my beer. He didn't ask. He didn't have to. The front door groaned open. Sarah walked in. My daughter, the only thing in this world I had left. She looked shattered. Her blue nursing scrubs were wrinkled, and dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. She carried the smell of the hospital antiseptic and exhaustion. She dropped her keys on the side table. Her eyes swept the room. She saw the wire snake on the floor. She saw me sitting in the dark. She saw Brad leaning against the granite counter, drinking my beer, looking satisfied. I waited, my heart hammered against my ribs. "Defend me, Sarah. Please. Just this once." "Brad cut the cable," I said. I tried to sound firm, but I sounded like a tattletale child. Sarah closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, holding it for a long second, as if she were preparing to dive a laver. She looked at her husband. Brad just shrugged, taking a long sip. "He was rotting his brain, babe. I did him a favor." Sarah looked at me. I searched her face for anger, for outrage. I found only defeat. "Brad is right, Dad," she whispered. The air left my lungs. It hurt more than if she had slapped me. "You need to do better," she said, reciting lines that sounded rehearsed. Lines that Brad had undoubtedly fed her during late-night whispers. "You need to engage. You're fading away." She walked past me. She didn't touch my shoulder. She didn't kiss my cheek. She went straight to the kitchen and started pulling out pans to cook dinner for him. I sat alone in the silence. The house settled around me, the wood frame groaning in the cooling evening air. I realized something terrifying. My patience hadn't bought me peace. It had cost me my dignity. They weren't just living with me. They were slowly, methodically erasing me. Dinner was quiet. The only sounds were the scrape of silverware on china and Brad's chewing. I ate quickly. Yeed down. I excused myself to my room, the guest room, the small one, but I didn't go to sleep. I sat on the edge of the twin bed, staring at the closed door. The journalist inside me, dormant for years, opened one eye. The sadness was still there, heavy and suffocating. But beneath it the cold, hard machinery of my mind began to turn. I waited. The house settled into a heavy, suffocating silence around midnight. I lay in the dark, listening. The floorboards above me creaked rhythmically. Brad pacing in the master bedroom. My master bedroom. The room where I had held my wife's hand as she took her last breath. Now it belonged to a man who treated me like a stray dog. He couldn't quite kick out. Eventually the pacing stopped. The deep rattling snore of a man without a conscience began to drift through the vents. I sat up. My knees popped, a sharp reminder of my age, but my mind felt strangely light. The fog of depression that had clouded me for months was lifting. In its place was a cold, familiar clarity. The investigative journalist wasn't dead. He had just been sleeping. And now he was wide open. I slipped out of bed. I didn't turn on a light. I knew every inch of this house. I had built the bookshelf in the hallway. I had laid the tile in the foyer. The house was my ally, not his. I moved down the corridor, stepping over the third slat of wood near the stairs, the one that always groaned. If you put weight on it, I moved like a shadow. I pushed open the door to the home office. Brad called it his command center. The air inside was thick with the smell of stale cologne and unearned arrogance. My old mahogany desk was cluttered with energy drink cans and crumpled receipts. His laptop sat open on the blotter, the little light on the side pulsing like a heartbeat. I sat in the leather chair. It felt foreign now, adjusted to his height, his weight. I cracked my knuckles, the sound sharp in the stillness. I wasn't the confused old man anymore. I was the hunter.
He was the prey.
I tapped the spacebar. The screen flared to life, casting a ghostly blue pallor over the room. No password. Of course not. He was so arrogant he couldn't imagine I knew how to use a trackpad, let alone navigate a file system. He thought I was a relic. I opened the browser. He had left multiple tabs open. Banking, email, Zillow. I started with the bank. I clicked the tab, and the numbers filled the screen. My breath hitched in my throat. It was my emergency credit card statement, the one with the $50,000 limit, reserved for medical catastrophes or disasters. The balance was in bold red, $65 for 2020. Over the limit. I felt a wave of nausea, but I forced myself to look closer. I scanned the transaction history. $1,200 the Prime Steakhouse, $4,000 Armani Suits Custom Tailoring, $800 Serenity Luxury Spa Package, $3,500 Executive Retreat in Cabo San Lucas. He wasn't a consultant, he was a leech, a parasite feeding on the host, until it withered. He had forged my digital signature on every single transaction. I didn't panic. Panic is for victims. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Click, click, click. I photographed every screen, every purchase, every date. Then I switched to the email tab. I typed Arthur Miller into the search bar. The results loaded instantly. My blood ran cold. Subject, Arthur Miller, long-term care strategy to admissions@goldenhorizonmemorycare.com. I opened it. Brad wrote, "The old man is rapidly deteriorating. He's becoming aggressive and confused. It's getting dangerous for my wife. Lies. Calculated, vicious lies. We need to expedite the admission process. I want him committed by Friday. Once he is secured in the facility, we will be listing the primary residence for sale immediately." I read on, market value is estimated at $1.2 million. That gives us a nice cushion to handle his expenses.
He wasn't just stealing my money. He was planning to steal my life. He was going to lock me in a cage, drug me into a stupor, and sell the home I built to fund his gambling and his suits. I scrolled down to the recipient list. I needed to know who else was involved, who else knew.
My finger hovered over the screen. CC, Sarah Thompson @gmail.com. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. The blue light of the screen blurred. Sarah. My daughter. The girl I taught to ride a bike. The woman I walked down the aisle. She was copied on the emails. She knew. She knew he was lying about my health. She knew he was selling the house. She hadn't stopped him. She hadn't warned me. A single tear rolled down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. There would be no tears tonight. Tonight was for evidence. I reached into my pajama pocket and pulled out a small USB drive I had swiped from the drawer earlier. I plugged it in. My hands were steady now, cold. I copied everything. The PDF bank statements, the email threads, the forged receipts, the Zillow listing drafts. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 20%, 50%, 100%. I ejected the drive. I wiped the browser history, clearing the cache so it looked exactly as he had left it. I closed the laptop. The light began to pulse again. I stood up. I left the office exactly as I found it. I crept back to my room, the floorboards silent under my feet. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind pick up outside. I didn't sleep. The sadness was gone now, replaced by something harder, something permanent. I had the facts. Now I needed a strategy. Saturday morning arrived with a gray, flat light that made the kitchen feel like a waiting room. I played my part perfectly. I shuffled into the room in my bathrobe, letting my slippers drag on the layer. I made my hands tremble as I reached for the coffee pot. Brad was already there, leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up. He just reached out and took the mug I had just poured. "Thanks, Artie," he muttered, taking a sip of my coffee. "Little weak today, isn't it?" I didn't argue. I just blinked, looking confused, and shuffled back to the table. I thought I made it strong," I mumbled, keeping my eyes on my knees. Sarah sat across from me. She was picking at a piece of dry toast. She wouldn't look at me. Every time I shifted in my chair, she flinched. The guilt was radiating off her like heat from a radiator. She knew what they were planning. She knew I was just an obstacle to be removed. A line item in a budget. I spent the weekend as a ghost. I watched TV with the volume too low. I napped in the chair. I let them talk over me, around me, through me. Then came Monday, 7:45 a.m. The front door opened. "Big meeting today," Brad announced, checking his reflection in the hall mirror. He adjusted his tie, a silk one I had bought myself 5 years ago. "Gotta close the deal?" "Go get 'em, Tiger," Sarah said. Her voice was thin, forced. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. The car engine roared to life and faded down the street. I waited 1 full minute. I counted to 60 in the silence of the hallway. Then I stood up. The stoop in my shoulders vanished. The tremble in my hands disappeared. I walked to the window and watched their car turn the corner. The confused old man was gone. The investigative journalist was back on the clock. I walked to the landline in the kitchen. I didn't need a phone book. I dialed the number from memory. "Law offices of Vance and Associates." A crisp voice answered. "Get me Robert," I said. My voice was deep, steady. "I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Vance is in a... Tell him it's Arthur Miller. Tell him the wolves are inside the fence." There was a pause. Then a click. "Arthur?" Robert Vance's voice was gravel and smoke. We had gone to war together against the city council in '98. He was cynical, ruthless, and the only man I trusted with my life. "Is everything okay?" "No, Robert. I'm being robbed." I laid it out for him. Concise. Brutal. The $65,000. The forged signatures. The email about the memory care facility. The plan to liquidate the house. Silence hung on the line for a moment, heavy and thoughtful. I heard the scratch of a fountain pen on paper. "I can have the accounts frozen in 20 minutes, Robert said. His tone was professional. Cold. "I'll file for an emergency restraining order. We'll allege elder abuse and financial fraud." "It's a nuclear option, Arthur. Once we push this button, there's no going back." "Push it," I said. Hard. "And Arthur?" "Yes?" "Are you safe?" "Physically?" "Not yet," I said, looking at the flimsy lock in the back door. "But I will be by noon." I hung up. 8:15 a.m. I dialed the next number. Hello? Elena, I said. Elena Russo lived next door. She was 70, sharp-tongued, and spent her days gardening and watching the street. Nothing happened on this block without Elena knowing the timestamp. Arthur? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Is he gone? He's gone? I need to know. Elena, you said you saw something. I did, she said, her voice trembling with indignation. Last Tuesday, when Sarah was at the hospital. He pulled into the driveway. He wasn't alone. My grip tightened on the phone. Who was it? A woman. Blonde, young, maybe 25. Elena paused. They were affectionate, Arthur. Right there in the front seat. He kissed her. He didn't even look to see if the blinds were open. I closed my eyes. A mistress. Of course. He was spending my retirement savings on hotels and jewelry for a stranger while my daughter worked double shifts to pay his gambling debts. Thank you, Elena. Keep watching. I always do, Arthur. I always do. 8:30 a.m. Time for the muscle. I called Mike, the Hammer, Kowalski. He ran the best locksmith service in the city, ex-military. He didn't just fix locks. He secured perimeters. Mike, I have a security breach. On my way, Artie. He arrived at 9 hours on AM sharp. His van was a rolling workshop. Mike stepped out, a mountain of a man with grease-stained hands and eyes that missed nothing. He walked up to the front door. He looked at the lock Brad had installed a few months ago, a cheap, shiny smart lock connected to an app on Brad's phone. Mike spat on the ground. Garbage, he grunted. Plastic gears. I could open this with a stiff credit card. Drill it out, I ordered. I want high-security deadbolts. Grade 1 commercial. Steel cores. Anti-pick pins. Front door, back door. Garage entry. Mike looked at me. He saw the fire in my eyes. He nodded once. Nobody gets in without a key, Artie. Not even with a battering ram. For the next 2 hours, the house screamed. Drills whined as they chewed through wood and metal. Strike plates were replaced with heavy-duty steel reinforced with 3-inch screws that bit deep into the house's frame. The smell of sawdust and hot metal filled the air. It was the smell of fortification. At 11 hours in a.m., the noise stopped. Mike wiped his hands on a rag and handed me 4 heavy brass keys. They felt cold and substantial in my palm. They weren't just keys. They were control. These are uncopyable, Mike said. You need a special card to get a duplicate. A SWAT team would have trouble with these doors now. I pulled out a wad of cash from my emergency stash, the one Brad hadn't found yet. I handed it to Mike. I tipped him $200. Thanks, Mike. Watch your 6, Artie, he said, packing up his drill. I stood in the hallway. The new deadbolt on the front door was a brushed steel beast. It looked impenetrable. I turned the thumb turn. Click thunk. The sound was heavy, final. The fortress was secure. Now, it was time to clean house. The house was secure. The perimeter was hardened. Now came the extraction. I walked down the hallway to the master bedroom. My hand hovered over the knob. This room used to be a sanctuary. It was where my wife and I had whispered in the dark for 40 years. It was where I had held her hand as the cancer finally took her. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the scent of lavender and old paper anymore. It smelled like Brad, a cloying mix of aggressive cologne and damp towels. I stepped inside. The room felt violated. They had pushed my heavy oak dresser into the corner to make room for a massive flat-screen TV. My wife's vanity was covered in Brad's clutter. Watches, cufflinks, loose change. I didn't let the anger consume me. I channeled it. I was a journalist on a deadline, and I had a story to finish. I went to the closet and pulled down 4 large suitcases. They hit the floor with a heavy thud. I unzipped them on the bed, and opened them wide like hungry mouths. I started with Brad's side of the closet. I grabbed the suits. The labels flashed under the recessed lighting. Armani, Hugo Boss, Zegna. The fabric was soft, expensive. Italian wool purchased with my retirement fund. I didn't take them off the hangers gently. I ripped them down. I didn't ladder them. I jammed them into the suitcase, crushing the collars, wrinkling the silk linings. I grabbed the silk ties, dozens of them, looking like colorful snakes. I threw them in a tangle on top of the suits. Zip, one bag full. I moved to the dresser. I scooped up his drawers, socks, underwear, t-shirts, and dumped them into the second bag. I saw a small velvet box tucked in the back of his sock drawer. I opened it, a diamond tennis bracelet. For Sarah? I checked the receipt, folded underneath. Date last Tuesday. Recipient, pickup. It wasn't for Sarah, it was for the blonde in the passenger seat. I snapped the box shut and tossed it into the bag. Let Sarah find it when she unpacked. Let her see what her loyalty had bought her. Sip, 2 bags. Then I turned to Sarah's side of the room. I stopped. My breath caught in my chest. Her side was neat. Her nursing scrubs were hung with care. Her shoes were lined up in pairs. On the nightstand, next to a half-empty glass of water, was a framed photo. It was the 2 of us. Her college graduation. She was beaming, her cap tilted, her arm around my neck. I looked younger then, happier, proud. My hand hovered over her clothes. My fingers trembled. She's your daughter, Arthur. She's your little girl. But then the image of the laptop screen flashed in my mind. ccsarah.thompson@gmail.com. She had read the emails. She had seen the plan to lock me away. She had sat at my table, eaten my food, and watched her husband sharpen the knife. She had chosen her family, and God help me, I had to choose mine. I grabbed her scrubs. I grabbed her jeans. I grabbed a photo from the nightstand. I packed them. I didn't jam them like I did Brad's. I placed them in, but the act felt final. It felt like I was packing away a memory of someone who had died. Zip, 3 bags. I packed her shoes and her toiletries into the 4th. It felt heavy, heavier than the others. It felt like I was carrying a body. Zip, I dragged the 4 suitcases through the house. The wheels rumbled on the hardwood, a low growl that echoed off the walls. I opened the front door and hauled them onto the porch. I lined them up. 4 soldiers standing in formation against the brick wall. I stepped back inside. I closed the door. I turned the thumb turn on the new deadbolt. Click. The sound was solid, mechanical, unforgiving. I went to the kitchen. My hands were shaking again, but not from age. From adrenaline, from the sheer, terrible weight of what I had just done. I put the kettle on. The whistle rose to a shriek, and I poured the water over a tea bag. Earl Grey, the smell of bergamot filled the kitchen, masking the scent of sawdust and betrayal. I took the cup and walked to the living room. I sat in my armchair by the front window, the one with the clear view of the driveway. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't turn on the lamps. I let the afternoon light fade into the bruised purple of twilight. I took a sip of tea. It was hot, grounding. I checked my watch, 6:10 p.m. They would be home any minute. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the father. I wasn't the confused old man. I was the judge, and the court was now in session. 6:15 p.m. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. Long shadows stretched across the lawn, reaching for the house like dark fingers. I heard it before I saw it, the aggressive roar of a truck engine. Brad's Ford F-150 turned into the driveway, tires crunching on the gravel. He parked crookedly, taking up 2 spaces, as usual. Sarah followed in her sedan, pulling in behind him. They got out. They were chatting, laughing about something. Brad said something that made Sarah giggle, a sound I hadn't heard directed at me in years. They looked like a team, a unit, and I was the opposition. They walked up the path together. Brad was swinging his keys on a carabiner, whistling. He stepped onto the porch. The whistle died. I saw the suitcases, 4 of them, lined up like tombstones against the brick. He stopped mid-step. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer confusion. He looked at the bags, then at the door, then back at the bags. "What is this?" he muttered, kicked the nearest suitcase, the one with his suits. "Garbage?" He shook his head, dismissing it. He turned to the door, selecting his key with practiced ease. He didn't know yet. He didn't know his world had ended 3 hours ago. He slid the key into the lock. It went in halfway, then it hit steel. He frowned. He pushed harder. Metal scraped against metal. A harsh grinding sound. Stupid key, he grunted. He pulled it out, blew on it, and tried again. He jiggled it. He twisted it. Nothing. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, stepping up behind him. She looked tired, her bag slung over her shoulder. "Keys stuck," Brad said, his voice tightening. The red flush of anger was starting to creep up his neck. "The mechanism is jammed." He pounded on the door with the heel of his hand. Thud, thud. "Arthur," he yelled, "open up. The lock is broken." I sat in my armchair, 6 feet away. I was separated from him by a pane of glass and a thin curtain. I could hear his breathing change. It was getting faster. Panicked. I reached out and pulled back the curtain. Just an inch. Brad saw the movement. He leaned in, peering through the glass. Our eyes locked. He looked shocked. I looked serene. I raised my teacup in a slow, deliberate toast. Then I took a sip. Brad's face contorted. The mask of the concerned son-in-law slipped completely, revealing the predator underneath. "He's in there," he screamed, turning to Sarah. "He locked us out. The old lunatic changed the locks." He turned back to the door and kicked it. Wham! The wood shuddered. Dust fell from the frame. But Mike's deadbolt? It didn't move a millimeter. It held like an anchor. "Open this door, old man," Brad roared. Spittle flew from his lips. "I live here. Open it!" He ran to the back of the house. I heard him rattling the patio door handle. Clack, clack, clack. Locked. He ran to the garage side door. Thump. Locked. He came back to the front, panting, sweating. His hair was wild. "I'm going to break it down," he yelled. He backed up to the edge of the porch, preparing to throw his shoulder against the solid oak. "Brad, stop." Sarah grabbed his arm. "People are watching." She pointed. Elena Russo was on her porch next door. She held her phone up, the camera lens steady. 2 other neighbors had stopped walking their dogs to watch the show. Brad froze. He saw the audience. He couldn't be the violent intruder. He had to be the victim. He pulled out his phone. He jabbed at the screen. "I'm calling the police," he shouted at the window, making sure I could hear him. "I'm going to have you committed tonight." "You're done, Arthur. You are done." "Good," I whispered into my tea. "Make the call." I watched him dial 911. I watched him put on his victim voice. He hunched his shoulders, making himself look smaller, harmless. "Yes, operator. It's my father-in-law."
He snapped. "He's locked us out. He's aggressive. I think he might have a weapon. We're terrified. Lies, but I expected them." 10 minutes later, the street lit up with blue strobe lights.
A cruiser pulled to the curb. Officer Davis stepped out. I knew Davis. We met at the town hall meetings. He was a veteran cop, 20 years on the force. He had gray hair and eyes that had seen everything. He was a fair man, a careful man. Brad ran to him like a child running to a parent. "Officer, thank God." Brad pointed a shaking finger at the house. "He's crazy. He threw us out. He's senile. He doesn't know what he's doing." Sarah stood by the car, hugging herself against the evening chill. She looked terrified. She looked at the house, then at Brad, then at the ground. Officer Davis walked up the path, his hand resting near his belt. He looked at the suitcases. He looked at the fresh sawdust near the lock. He knocked on the door. 3 sharp, authoritative raps. I stood up. I straightened my cardigan. I adjusted my collar. I opened the door, but I kept the heavy security chain on. The gap was only 3 inches. "Mr. Miller?" Davis asked, peering into the slice of light. "Good evening, Officer Davis," I said. My voice was calm, steady. "Sir, your son-in-law says you are confused," Davis said, his eyes scanning my face for signs of dementia. "He says you've illegally locked him out of his residence." I looked Davis dead in the eye. "I am not confused, officer. I am the sole owner of this property. The deed is in my name, and I am currently a victim of grand larceny and elder abuse." Davis paused. He looked back at Brad, who was hovering on the lawn, looking frantic. He looked back at me. "May I come in, Mr. Miller?" "Only you," I said. I unhooked the chain. Davis stepped inside. I slammed the door shut before Brad could even take a step. I threw the deadbolt. Click. The silence of the house returned. I led Davis to the living room. The coffee table was set up like a courtroom exhibit. The deed to the house. The printouts of the bank statements, with the forged signatures. The photos of the emails. He stole $65,000, I said, pointing to the columns of red numbers. He forged my digital signature on credit card applications. I handed him the email printout, the one to the memory care facility. And this, my voice trembled slightly. This is his plan. He was going to have me committed to a facility against my will, to sell my house. Davis read the email. His eyebrows pulled together. His jaw tightened. He calls you the asset, Davis muttered. Yes, an asset to be liquidated. Davis took a deep breath. He pulled out his department phone and began taking photos of the documents. This is serious, Mr. Miller. This is fraud. Attempted conspiracy. He looked at me. Do you want these people removed from your property? Immediately. Understood. We walked back to the front door. I opened it. Brad was standing right there, smirking. He thought Davis had gone in there, seen a confused old man, and was coming out to arrest me. Is he ready to go, officer? Brad asked, stepping forward. Do we need the handcuffs? Officer Davis walked right up to Brad. He invaded his personal space. He loomed over him. Mr. Thompson. Davis's voice was ice. This is Mr. Miller's private property. You are not on the deed. You have no lease agreement. Brad blinked. What? But we live here. Not anymore, Davis said. I have seen evidence of significant financial crimes. Serious ones. Brad's smirk vanished. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. All the color drained from his face. That's a lie, Brad squeaked. He's making it up. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises, Davis said, his hand resting near his handcuffs. Your belongings are in these bags. If you remain on this property after 5 minutes, you will be arrested for criminal trespassing. Brad looked at the suitcases. He looked at the neighbors who were now openly staring. He looked at me. There was no confusion in his eyes now, only pure distilled hate. You'll regret this, Arthur, he spat. You'll die alone in this house. He grabbed 2 suitcases. He dragged them to his truck and threw them into the bed. Slam. He turned to Sarah. She was still standing by the car, frozen. Get in the car, Sarah, Brad yelled. Sarah looked at him. Then she looked at me. She walked up the path, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. Her eyes were wet. Dad, she whispered. It was a plea. Let me stay. I'm your daughter. Don't do this. I looked at her. I loved her more than my own life. But looking at her now, I didn't see my little girl. I saw the accomplice. You were copied on the email, Sarah, I said softly. The words hung in the air between us. She flinched as if I had struck her. Her face crumbled. The denial died in her throat. She knew there was no hiding it. She knew that I knew. She lowered her head. A single sob escaped her lips. She turned around. She picked up her bags. She walked to the truck, her shoulders shaking. They drove away. Tires screeched as Brad peeled out, leaving black marks on the pavement. Officer Davis touched the brim of his cap. I'll file the report tonight, Mr. Miller. A detective will call you tomorrow. Thank you, officer. Davis got in his cruiser and drove away. I stood on the porch for a moment. The street was quiet. Elena gave me a small wave from her porch. I nodded back. I went inside. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. Click-thunk. I was alone. The house was empty. The silence was absolute. But for the first time in 6 months, it didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a fortress. And I was the king. Tuesday passed in a blur of paperwork and legal bureaucracy. I spent the morning at the courthouse, filing police reports and financial fraud affidavits. Robert Vance, my attorney, was a shark in a pinstripe suit. By noon, he had secured a temporary restraining order. By 2:00 p.m., every bank account, with my name on it, was frozen solid. The house felt different now. It was quiet, but it wasn't the empty silence of before. It was the silence of a bunker. I checked the locks 3 times an hour. I kept the curtains drawn. I was safe, or so I thought. Thursday, I hired a professional. I needed to know what I was up against. I needed to know why. I met Frank the Ghost Moretti at a diner on the edge of town. Frank was an ex-vice cop who had retired early after disagreements with management. He found people who didn't want to be found. He dug up dirt that had been buried under concrete. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and rain. Frank slid into the booth opposite me. He didn't say hello. He just slid a thick manila folder across the sticky table. "You were right to kick him out, Arthur," Frank said, his voice like gravel. "Your instincts are still sharp." "Why?" I asked, keeping my hand on the folder. "Is it just the money?" "It's never just the money. It's the debt." Frank tapped the folder. I opened it. Photos spilled out, grainy, long lens shots. Brad entering a nondescript building in the warehouse district. Brad leaving a casino at 4 a.m., looking disheveled. Brad arguing with a man who looked like he broke thumbs for a living. "He's not a consultant," Frank said, taking a sip of black coffee. "He's a gambler, and a bad one." I picked up a photo of Brad at a poker table. His eyes were wide, desperate. "He owes $80,000 to loan sharks," Frank said. "The kind of people who don't send overdue notices. They send guys with baseball bats." The pieces of the puzzle slammed together. The rush to sell the house. The urgent email to the memory care facility. The theft of my emergency fund. He didn't just want the money for a luxury lifestyle. He was drowning. He was trying to liquidate my life to save his own legs. "Where are they living?" I asked. "Pine Creek Apartments," Frank said. "Weekly rentals. It's on the bad side of town. Roaches and thin walls." He paused, looking at me with something like pity. "Sarah is working double shifts at the hospital to pay the rent," he said softly. "She looks bad, Arthur. She looks like a ghost." My heart clenched. My daughter was suffering. She was working herself into the ground to support a man who was gambling away her future. "She's enabling him," I whispered. "She's in deep," Frank agreed. "She thinks she can save him." I paid Frank in cash. I left the diner, feeling heavier than when I walked in. I couldn't save her. Not yet. She had to see the monster for herself. Saturday morning, 2:30 a.m. The world was asleep. I was in a light doze, the kind where your ears are still awake. Crack. The sound of shattering glass tore through the night. I was out of bed before my eyes were fully open. I didn't freeze. I didn't cower. I grabbed my phone and the heavy Maglite flashlight I kept on the nightstand. I ran to the living room window. Brad was in the driveway. He was illuminated by the street lamp, a chaotic silhouette of rage. He was swaying. Even from here, through the double-paned glass, I could see he was drunk. He held the aluminum baseball bat in one hand. He had just smashed my mailbox. It lay on the ground, a twisted piece of metal. He swung the bat again. My terracotta flower pots, the ones my wife had planted years ago, exploded into dust. "Come out, you coward!" Brad screamed. His voice was slurred, raw. "You ruined my life." He wasn't just angry. He was terrified. The loan sharks were calling. The clock was ticking, and he blamed me for cutting off his supply. I hit record on my phone. The camera focused on his face. I dialed 911 on the landline with my other hand. 911, what is your emergency? "Intruder in progress," I said, my voice calm, professional. 142 Maple Drive. Known aggressor, armed with a baseball bat. Violation of a restraining order. "Officers are en route, sir. Lock your doors." "They are locked," I said. Outside, Brad pulled a spray can from his jacket pocket. He walked to the garage door. He sprayed a jagged red line, THIEF. He threw the can down. He turned to the front door. He raised the bat over his head. I stepped back from the window, bracing myself. Wham! The sound was deafening. The heavy oak door shuddered in its frame. Wham! Splinters of wood flew from the surface. But Mike's deadbolt, it held. The steel strike plate didn't budge. The door groaned, absorbing the violence, but it refused to open. "I know you're in there," Brad yelled, kicking the door now. "Open up." He was weeping. It was a pathetic, ugly sound. "I need the money. Just give me the money." Then the wail of sirens cut through the night air. Brad froze. His head snapped toward the sound. The red haze of rage evaporated, replaced by the cold white light of panic. He dropped the bat. Clang, he tried to run to his truck, but he was too drunk. He tripped over the curb, his feet tangling in the grass. He fell face first onto the concrete driveway. He didn't get up. He just lay sobbing into the cement. 2 cruisers screeched to a halt in front of the house. Officer Davis was the first one out. They were on him in seconds. "Hands behind your back? Do it now." I watched from the window as they hauled him up. His nose was bleeding. He looked small, defeated. "He'd attacked me," Brad slurred, spitting blood. "He set a trap." "Shut up, Thompson," Davis said, tightening the cuffs. I walked out onto the porch. The cool night air hit my face. I held up my phone. "I have it all on video, officer." Davis walked up the steps. He looked at the smashed pots. He looked at the spray paint. He looked at the dents in the door. Vandalism, Davis listed. His voice flat. Destruction of property. Assault with a deadly weapon. Violation of a court order. He looked at me. "He's not walking away from this one tonight." "Take him away," I said. They used Brad into the back of the cruiser. He was screaming obscenities now, cursing my name, cursing the world. As the cruiser pulled away, I looked down the street, parked in the deep shadows. 3 houses down was a sedan, Sarah's car. She was there. She had followed him. She had watched him smash my home. She had watched him get arrested. She didn't get out. She didn't scream. She didn't come to check on me. For a long minute, the car sat there, idling in the dark. Then the brake lights flared. She put it in gear and drove away, slowly, like a hearse. I went back inside. I locked the battered door the fortress had held, but the war wasn't over. Sunday morning broke with a deceptive calm. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and the world looked normal, but my front door was still splintered, and the word thief was still screaming in red paint on my garage door. I was sweeping up the last of the terracotta shards from the driveway when my phone buzzed. It was Robert Vance. "Arthur," he said. "No pleasantries. No, how are you?" His voice was flat, like a judge reading a sentence. "I have bad news." I gripped the broom handle. "He's out?" "Bail was set at $7,500 this morning," Robert said. "He walked out of county jail 20 minutes ago." My stomach turned over. "How?" "His accounts are frozen. I saw the statements. He has $80 to his name. Someone posted it for him, Arthur. Cash." "Who?" I asked, though a cold sinking feeling in my gut told me I already knew the answer. "Sarah," Robert said gently. "She was at the bail bondsman's office at opening. She emptied her savings account, Arthur. That was everything she had." I dropped the phone. It hit the concrete, the screen cracking slightly. I stared at the red paint on the garage. Thief. Brad hadn't just stolen my money. He had stolen her future. That savings account was her freedom fund money we had started saving when she was 16. It was for a house, for a rainy day. She had used it to buy freedom for the man who had tried to break down her father's door with a baseball bat. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a blinding, white-hot frustration. I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring. "Sarah," I said. "Dad?" Her voice was tight, defensive. I could hear the wind rushing past the phone. She was in the car. He was probably right next to her. "Why?" I asked. The word came out like a plea. "Why did you do it?" "He loves me, Dad," she said. Her voice cracked, sounding small and desperate. "You don't understand. He's under so much pressure. He made a mistake." "A mistake?" I shouted, losing my composure for the first time. "He smashed my property. He forged my signature. He tried to have me committed to a nursing home to sell my house. He explained that." Sarah yelled back. She was crying now. "He said you were getting confused. He was trying to help you. He said you'd twist it around. The manipulation was perfect. Brad had inoculated her against the truth. He had told her I would lie. So when I told the truth, it sounded like a lie." "Sarah, listen to me," I said, forcing my voice to drop, to be calm. "He is a gambler. I have photos. He owes $80,000 to loan sharks. That's why he needs the money. Not for business. For his life. Silence on the line. For a second, I thought I had reached her. Then, her voice came back. Cold, hard. He told me you'd say that, she whispered. He said you'd make up stories about gambling to ruin his reputation. I have proof, Sarah. I have pictures. I don't want to see them, she screamed. Just leave us alone. Stop trying to ruin our marriage. Click. She hung up. I stood there in the driveway, the phone pressing against my ear, listening to the dial tone. I looked at the house, my fortress. It had kept him out physically, but it couldn't keep him out of her head. I went back inside and sat in the dark living room. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't read. I realized something then, sitting in the silence of my victory and my defeat. You cannot save someone who does not want to be saved. You cannot pull a drowning person out of the water if they are fighting you. They will only pull you down with them. I had to wait. I had to let the water rise. I had to let the truth hit her, not from my mouth, but from his fist. It was the hardest thing I had ever had to do. I was a father, and I had to watch my daughter walk into the fire. I sat back in my chair. I waited for the breaking point. 3 days later, Tuesday night brought a storm that rattled the gutters and turned the world outside my window into a blur of gray water and wind. It was 9:11 p.m., but the sky had been black since 5. I was sitting in the kitchen, nursing a cold cup of coffee. The house was secure. Mike's deadbolts were thrown. The windows were locked. But I felt a phantom draft, a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. My phone sat on the table. I had been staring at it for an hour, willing it to ring, yet dreading the sound. Then the screen lit up. Incoming call. Sarah, I answered before the first ring finished. Sarah? Dad? Her voice was tiny. It wasn't the voice of a 30-year-old nurse. It was the voice of a child waking up from a nightmare. She was trembling so hard I could hear the phone rattling against her ear. I'm here, honey. What's wrong? Help me. The 2 words I had been waiting for. The 2 words that broke my heart. Where are you? I asked, my voice dropping into the low, steady register I used to use when interviewing victims. Calm, anchoring. The apartment. He went out to the liquor store. I was looking for a stamp in his desk. She let out a jagged sob. I found the bag, Dad. The one he keeps locked. What was in it, Sarah? Papers. Not just the loan shark stuff. She gasped for air. Divorce papers, dated 3 months ago, and a one-way ticket to Costa Rica for next week. The blood drained from my face. He wasn't just using her. He was planning to cash out, sell my house, drain her savings, and disappear into the tropical sunset, leaving her with the debt and the wreckage. He never loved me, she whispered, the realization sounding like glass breaking in her throat. I was just the mark. Crash. A sound exploded in the background of the call. Wood splintering. A heavy thud. You ungrateful witch. Brad's voice, distorted by rage and cheap whiskey. He was back.
Sarah, I shouted. Lock the bathroom door. Now! He's here! He's...
The phone clattered. I heard a scream, then the sound of a struggle. Then the line went dead. I didn't freeze. I didn't think. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed the heavy maglite from the counter. I ran into the storm. I drove like a man with nothing to lose. The rain lashed against the windshield like handfuls of gravel. The wipers couldn't keep up, slashing uselessly at the deluge. I ran 2 red lights. I took a corner on 2 wheels, the tires screaming against the wet asphalt. I punched 911 into the Bluetooth system. Emergency, I barked. Domestic violence in progress. 405 Pine Creek Drive, apartment 3B. Suspect is violent, possibly armed. Victim is trapped. Send everyone. Units are rolling, sir. Are you... I'm the father, I said, and I'm 2 minutes out. I hung up. I pulled into the complex. It was a cluster of peeling stucco buildings that looked like they were rotting in the rain. I saw Brad's truck parked crookedly near the stairs. The driver's side door was left open, swaying in the wind. I parked. I didn't bother locking the car. I ran. My knees screamed in protest, the arthritis firing like hot needles. but I forced them to work. I took the stairs 2 at a time. Third floor, apartment 3B. The front door wasn't just unlocked, it was kicked in. The cheap particle board frame lay in splinters on the welcome mat. I heard screaming from inside. "Where is it? Where did you put the cash?" I burst through the doorway. The apartment was a war zone. Lamps were overturned. Sofa cushions were slashed. The air smelled of spilled bourbon and terror. Brad was at the end of the hallway. He was pounding on the bathroom door with his shoulder. "Thud, thud, open it, Sarah, or I swear to God I'll burn this place down with you in it." He stepped back for another run at the door. "Brad," I roared. He spun around. He looked demonic. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red. His shirt was torn. He held a heavy brass table lamp in his right hand like a club. He saw me, and a twisted grin spread across his face. "You," he hissed. "The ghost finally came to save the princess?" "It's over, Brad," I said, stepping over a broken vase. I held the heavy flashlight at my side. "The police are 30 seconds away. Put it down." "I'm not going back to jail," he screamed. "I need that money. She stole my ticket." He lunged at me. He was 30 years younger, stronger, desperate. But he was drunk, and he was sloppy. He swung the lamp in a wild, overhead arc. I sidestepped. The brass smashed into the plaster wall where my head had been a second ago, sending dust flying. He stumbled, off balance. I didn't hit him. I wasn't going to give him a lawsuit. I shoved him, hard. He crashed backward into a bookshelf. It toppled over, burying him in a landslide of paperbacks and cheap knickknacks. He roared and scrambled up, grabbing a shard of a broken mirror from the floor. "I'm going to kill you both." He raised the glass shard. "Police, drop the weapon." The doorway filled with blue uniforms, 3 officers, Glocks drawn, leveled at his chest. "Drop it now." Brad froze. He looked at the jagged glass in his hand. He looked at me. He looked at the barrels of the guns. The fight went out of him. His shoulders slumped. The glass fell from his hand and shattered on the floor. "Get on the ground. Face down. Hands behind your back." They swarmed him, knees in his back, cuffs clicking tight. Officer Davis was there. He hauled Brad up by his collar. Brad was weeping now, begging, blaming the loan sharks, blaming me, blaming the rain. "Get him out of here," Davis said, disgust dripping from his voice. They dragged him out. The apartment fell silent, save for the sound of the rain pounding on the roof. I walked to the bathroom door. The wood was cracked around the lock. "Sarah?" I called softly. "It's safe. He's gone." Silence. Then the slow click of the lock. The door opened. Sarah stood there. She was hugging herself. Her lip was split. A dark bruise was already blooming on her cheekbone. She held a crumpled envelope in her hand. The ticket to Costa Rica. She looked at the wreckage of the apartment. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were wide hollow. The denial was gone. The hope was gone. All that was left was the raw, bleeding truth. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, her voice breaking into 1,000 pieces. "I'm so sorry, Dad. You were right. You were always right." She collapsed. I caught her before she hit the floor. I held her tight, letting her cry into my rain-soaked coat. I stroked her hair, just like I did when she was 6 years old, and afraid of the thunder. "I know," I whispered into her ear. "I've got you. It's okay." She looked up at me, shame burning in her eyes. "I have nowhere to go. He spent it all." I wiped a tear from her bruised cheek. "You have a home, Sarah," I said firmly. "You always have a home." I helped her up. We walked out of the ruined apartment, leaving the debris of her marriage behind. We walked down the stairs, into the rain, towards my car. The wheels of justice grind slow, they say. But sometimes, when you grease them with a mountain of evidence, they spin fast enough to crush you. Brad went to prison on a Tuesday. There was no plea deal this time. The district attorney looked at the photos of my bruised daughter, the forged bank statements, and the police report from the apartment, and he smelled blood. The assault charge stuck. The fraud charges stuck. 4 years in state, with a minimum of 2 before parole. I was there when they let him out. He looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit, stripped of his Italian suits and his arrogance. He didn't look at me. He was too busy scanning the gallery, looking for the faces of the men he owed money to. Rumor had it the debts had been sold to someone on the inside. Brad wasn't going to a country club. He was going to a place where his consulting skills wouldn't buy him a pack of cigarettes. Sarah moved back into her old room, the guest room, for a month. It was a quiet month. We didn't talk much about the past. We watched old movies. We gardened. I heard her crying in the shower sometimes, mourning the life she thought she had, the man she thought he was. I let her cry. Grief is a river. You have to let it flow, or it drowns you. Then slowly, the color returned to her cheeks. She started picking up extra shifts, not to pay a bookie, but to save for a deposit. She started seeing a therapist who specialized in narcissistic abuse. She started to heal. 4 months later, Wednesday, the house smelled of pot roast, carrots, and thyme. The smell of a home that was lived in, not just occupied. I stood at the kitchen island, carving the beef. My hands were steady. The arthritis was still there, a dull ache in the knuckles. But the shaking had stopped weeks ago. The front door opened. "Hey, Dad, I brought the wine." Sarah walked in. She looked different. Her hair was cut shorter, sharper. She was wearing a coat she had bought with her own money. She looked like herself again. "Red or white?" I asked, not looking up from the roast. "Red. A Cabernet? The good stuff." She hung her coat on the rack. She walked through the hallway, her boots clicking on the hardwood. I watched her glance at the front door. The wood was repaired, sanded, and stained to match the original grain. You couldn't tell where the battering ram of a baseball bat had hit it, but the lock was the same. Mike's heavy, brushed steel deadbolt. Grade 1 commercial. She reached out and touched it, a reflex. She smiled, a small, sad curving of her lips. "Fort Knox," she whispered. "Damn straight," I said, bringing the platter to the table. We sat down. The dining room was warm. The ghosts were gone. The table was set for two, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was comfortable. Sarah poured the wine. The liquid was dark, rich. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To the truth," I countered, clinking my glass against hers. We ate. The roast was perfect, tender. Honest food. Halfway through the meal, Sarah put her fork down. She looked at me across the centerpiece. Her eyes were clear blue and fierce. "Thanks for saving me, Ed," she said. Her voice was thick with emotion, but it didn't break. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come that night." I chewed slowly, swallowing the bite of potato. I wiped my mouth with a linen napkin. "I didn't save you, Sarah," I said gently. She frowned. "You broke down the door. You stood up to him." "I just turned on the lights," I said. "I just showed you what was in the room. You're the one who walked out the door. You're the one who testified. You're the one who filed the papers." I reached across the table and took her hand. It was warm, alive. "You saved yourself, honey." She squeezed my hand. A single tear escaped. But she wiped it away quickly. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a survivor. Later that night, after Sarah had gone home to her new apartment, a nice place with a heavy deadbolt of its own, I sat in my study. The desk was clean. The laptop was closed. I opened the top drawer. Lying there, next to my passport and my spare reading glasses, was a coil of black wire. The coaxial cable. The one Brad had ripped out of the wall that first night. I had fixed the connection weeks ago. The TV worked fine. The news hummed in the background, talking about the weather, the economy, the world turning. But I kept the cut wire. I picked it up. The copper core glinted in the lamplight. It was jagged, sharp. It was a reminder that sometimes connection is a weakness. Sometimes you have to let the signal die to hear the truth. Sometimes you have to let the screen go black to see the reflection of the monster standing behind you. I ran my thumb over the severed plastic. I wasn't a ghost in my own home anymore. I wasn't the confused old man. I was Arthur Miller, father, journalist, homeowner, and nobody was ever going to disconnect me again. I put the wire back in the drawer and closed it. Click. I learned the hard way that dignity isn't something you're given. It's something you have to fight for, tooth and nail, against the people who claim to love you the most. If you are listening to this, if you are sitting in a room that feels too quiet, staring at a phone that never rings with good news, if you feel like a guest in your own life, don't wait. Document everything. Take the photos. Keep the receipts. Change the locks. Save yourself, because in the end, the only person coming to rescue you is you. Thanks for walking this journey with us. Now I have one question left for you. With me safe, Sarah free, and Brad rotting in a cell with his debts calling, was this justice? Or did he deserve worse? Let me know in the comments. And remember, check your deadbolt